Hello, my name is Raph, and I'm going to talk about, as he said, a little bit different than what was supposed to be, because the talk was supposed to be about the research we've been doing in the DMT-Nexus with the different plants that we've been analyzing, and it was going to be a bit more technical, and I decided to do something that is more practical for people, I think everyone in this room who's interested. And the question that drives this talk is, how can anybody here in this room who's interested in knowing can test plants in their area, in their neighborhood, or things they're growing in their garden to see if these plants have compounds of interest, for example DMT, or maybe they want to see if a cactus has more mescaline than the other cactus. So how can you do that if you're not a chemist and you don't have access to a lab? And the idea is because many people are buying ayahuasca and different plants over the internet, and that's fine because I think it allows people who would not have access to these plants to have these experiences which can transform their lives. But I think the idea in long term is to make it more sustainable, I think. So to find things that you can grow yourself, or that you can find in your neighborhood and that you can sustainably harvest. So this all came about because I was researching these plants for many years, and like 10 or 15 years ago, back there in Brazil where I'm from, there was not a lot of information about these different plants. I mean, there was some, but for example, there was no Google Scholar that I could check the publications and things like that. And I'm not sure if Arrowhead was there already, maybe, but anyways, very little information. And I would have these experiences, right? And I guess a lot of you drug nerds like me here would agree that like once you have one of these experiences, you want to ask all these questions like, oh, and how, what is this plant, and what is inside of it, and what other plants are similar to it. And for example, I would participate in this ayahuasca rituals where I would these indigenous people would be blowing these snuffs up my nose, and I was like, wow, you know, and I kind of knew they were related to tobacco, some of these things, but then I also saw them preparing with other plants, and I was wondering, okay, but what are they putting inside? What am I actually taking? Is it some tryptamine, or is it maybe some compound I don't want, like some scopolamine related, maybe more toxic compound? Or maybe other times, there were many situations, right? So I would also go, for example, with some friends, and we would go pick mushrooms, and there was this one guy who would be like, oh yeah, the mushrooms from that field, they're different, the experience is different from this field. And I'm kind of skeptic, and I was like, yeah, really? But I had no way to test it, right? I wanted to test, but I couldn't, I didn't know how to. So the answer came about some years ago when I was working with harm reduction, first from a like psychosocial perspective, so helping people trip sitting and stuff. And then I started working also with analysis. So I was going to Boom Festival and working with the people doing the testing, drug testing. And I realized there was this technique they were using that is actually very simple once someone shows you how to do it, once you get the hang of it. And it's called thin layer chromatography. And the thing is, for maybe someone that's not a chemist, is like, oh, chromatography, what are you talking about? But it's very simple, and I'm going to try to explain with an analogy how it works. And then I'm going to try to, I'm going to explain, like, I'm going to show some of the tests I've been doing and the results and how you can interpret the results. And then at the end, how anyone here who wants can get this material and do these tests themselves. So I'm going to explain the analogy with a race, right? So let's imagine this race, and let's take three characters, okay? So there are these three women who are in this race, A, B, C. So Anna, Barbara, and Caroline, okay? So let's say that Anna is the one, you know when in the race there is like a car that goes in front and, you know, it leads the way? So let's say Anna is the person that is in this car. She's just like leading the way of the race. And let's say that this race, there is a very particular thing about it, which is it's in a town where there are these guys there, and they're like beautiful guys, and they can cook, and they can clean, and they can dance, they can do everything. So it's like, oh, these girls are like, oh, nice, you know, these guys. So let's say Barbara, okay, Anna she doesn't care, okay? She just wants to go all the way to the end of the race. Let's say Barbara, on the other hand, she has a boyfriend, so she's not gonna like do much, but she at least, you know, slows down a little bit to, you know, like hello, you know, say hello. So as Anna walks, maybe it goes 1 kilometer, maybe Barbara goes like half a kilometer, you know, she's like halfway going. And let's say Caroline, she hasn't had a boyfriend in years and these guys are perfect, and she's like, okay, I'm not gonna, you know, screw this race, I don't care about this race, I'm just gonna stay here. So she, you know, walks very slowly and she stays there talking to everybody. So now let's say that I know the characteristics of these ladies, but let's say we put like a cloth over them, right? So I don't know who is who in the beginning of the race. But then we start the race, and once the first person finishes, I take a picture and I see, okay, there's one person at the end, one person at the middle, and one person in the beginning. So even if I don't know, because I can't see who's who, just by the fact where they are, I know who they are. So I can say, okay, the first one is Anna, the second one is Barbara, and the third one is Caroline. So let's keep this analogy in mind, and now we'll go over the process of TLC, and you'll see how this makes sense. So can I have the water, please? So these are some of the plants I tested as an example. And I just got like a little bit of different plants, like half a gram. I could be even less, right? Different plants that I wanted to test and see if this method works. And what you do is you just cut these plants up, put in a little vial, and you fill it up with just like a small amount of a solvent. The solvent can be many different things. It could be alcohol, it could be this or that. But for this, I'm using a mixture which is methanol ammonia. You don't have to care about it. But anyways, it's just a solvent. And what it does is it grabs the different substances that are in the plant. And so they go to the solvent. And what do? You get this little tiny glass tube, which is called a microcapillary. And you put it inside where the solvent and the plant is, and it soaks up a little bit of this liquid, right? It's not like a pipette that you have to press anything. You just like touch the liquid and it soaks up. And then you touch this microcapillary on the bottom of the plate, as you see in the picture. And what is this plate? It's just like a kind of sheet of paper, but on one side is aluminum foil. It's just a thin layer of aluminum foil. And on the other side is a material called silica. And it's just a porous material, it absorbs. Has a particular characteristics, but anyways. So let's say you wanted to test 3 plants. So I put like one plant here, Cicotra viridis, here I put whatever, something else, here I put another one. So I want to test 3 plants, so I put a little bit of that solvent of the plant in each one of these positions. And then I put this paper, this TLC plate, on a little container that has a little bit of the solvent also. And what it does is it starts soaking up the solvent, and you see the line, you can see the line there, and this is, you see that the line is going up, and it takes maybe 15 minutes or something to go all the way up. And as it does that, it's taking along the substances that you put on the bottom, right? So at the end, once the solvent reaches the top, you just remove this from the plate, let it dry for a few minutes, and you look with a UV light, right? Later I'm going to explain how you can get all this material, but it's very simple. And then when you look at the plate with a UV light, you see some spots. So let's say the first substance here, let's say it's a mixture of DMT and let's say, for example, I was testing some phalaris that Sam was talking about. And some phalaris plants, they have DMT and they also maybe have gramine, which some people think it's unwanted, maybe it's a toxic substance. And I want to know, okay, should I consume this plant or does it have something toxic? So if it has these 2 substances, when I look with the UV light, I will see 2 spots in the plate. So I know already that it's 2 substances at least. So it's not just one. Maybe for example, I could also test some MDMA with this. And if the MDMA has 2 spots, oh, this is not MDMA, this is a mixture of MDMA and something else. So that would be a very useful information. And then on top of the spots, So, okay, so the first information, if you remember the race, it's the same thing. So DMT will always be, for example, at the middle of the plate, more or less. Just like Barbara was always at the middle of the race once the first person reached the top. So I will know by the position of the spot, and then I put a little reagent on top. I don't know if you guys are familiar, like people test MDMA and they put this reagent and it turns black, like Marquis reagent, and it turns black and people are like, oh yeah, this is MDMA. Yeah, but the problem is if this MDMA is mixed with something else, you maybe get a false positive and you're like, yeah, it's MDMA, but maybe it has also something toxic in it. So the thing is with the TLC, you can see the substances separated, and it's you eliminate a lot of false positives. So then how do you interpret the results? As I said, you get the height of the substance, and you put a reagent on top and it will turn a certain color, and then you have a sheet where you can compare. Okay, so DMT will be at such height and it will turn such color with that reagent, and that's it, you have your answer. I will expand a little bit more on that in a second. So I'm going to give you some examples. So I was going to test some capi from ayahuasca, Banisteriopsis capi, and some vendors have been selling this plant, which is called Alicia nisopetala. They were selling as ayahuasca, okay? They were selling as capi. And the problem is, we tested this plant in a lab with GCMS, which is a more expensive instrument, and we saw that that plant does not have harmalas, which is what you want in the capi. So it had some unknown compounds and it could be toxic, we don't know, so we were advising people not to take. But what if you buy this capi and it doesn't come like that, where you can see the cross section and you see how it's kind of different. Maybe it comes powdered. So how do you know? And I wanted to know, does this method, can it tell apart these two substances? And the answer is yes. So for a moment, let's take a look at this image on your right. So the first column here is capi, right? It has 3 spots. So these spots represent exactly what they are supposed to be. The top one is harmine, then is harmaline, then is tetrahydroharmine. Okay? So on the middle lane here is caffeine. I just put it together and I'll briefly explain why I'm testing the different substances always compared with caffeine. Because depending on the temperature of the day and a few things, maybe all these 3 substances, they move a little bit down or they move a little bit up. So if I would give you a number, like, okay, harmine is supposed to be at 7 centimeters. You can see a ruler here. It's at 7 centimeters. And maybe that day it was a little bit below. So it would be like, oh, that's not what I wanted. Yeah, it can change a little bit. But if you put caffeine on the lane next to it, in proportion, they change similarly. So if harmine goes up, caffeine also goes up a little bit. So that's a way I found to reduce a lot the error. So I came up with a calculator, and it's very simple. Online, you can just put on your plate the caffeine, the height that it is. So for example, 6.2. And then you're like, okay, what height will harmine be? And the calculator will tell you. It will be at 7. So that's a much more reliable way. And I tested this with hundreds of substances, like literally thousands of tests. And so, for example, now here is Alicia nisopetala, which is this other substance, this other vine that is supposed to have harmine and harmaline and all of this. But as you see, it doesn't have those same spots, right? So if you were testing this, very simple, it would take you 20 minutes. You would see, okay, this does not have what I want. It has another substance here that I have no clue what it is, but anyways, it's not what I want. And this is just an example because with another kind of UV light, you see it shines very brightly in these specific colors, like harmine more bluish, then more greenish, yellowish, or whatever you call this color. I forgot. Okay, what else? I wanted to test some cactus because I bought some cactus. I have some that came from a person that grows cactus specifically for mescaline content. But the other day I was walking down the street and I saw in a flower shop some San Pedro. I was like, oh, nice. And it was really cheap. I was like, perfect. You know, I want to test if the San Pedro from the flower shop has a lot of mescaline too. So you can see not only what it has, but also you can have an idea of how much it has. And this is by the size of the spot. So it's if a very tiny spot, you can see, okay, it's less quantity. If it's a bigger spot, it's a bigger quantity. So all you have to do is get a tiny little bit of the cactus, like 2 grains of rice or something, so it won't hurt the cactus. Just a tiny little bit of both cactus. You put it in the same amount of solvent, you put it in the plate, and then you'll look and you'll compare the size of the spots. So this one here on the right is the San Pedro that I had that supposedly had a lot of mescaline. And this spot is the mescaline, okay? So indeed it had. The one in the middle is some pure mescaline I had to just compare, and you can see it's at the same height. So that's mescaline. This spot here on the top you can ignore, it's just fumaric acid because it was the mescaline fumarate, a way I did to crystallize it. And San Pedro, this is the one from the flower shop. So you cannot see anything here. Actually, there is a very faint little spot there. So I could already answer my question. So I'm not going to buy any more this cactus from the flower shop. I bought one small cutting. And I'm not going to buy any more, even if it's cheap, because I know that it does not have mescaline I want. So what else? I wanted to compare Psychotria viridis and Diplopteris cabrerana, which both supposedly have DMT. And I tested them before. Some people were saying that Diplopteris cabrerana has 5-meo DMT, but the tests show that it doesn't. It has DMT, and it has way more DMT than the Psychotria viridis I tested. So this is Diplopteris cabrerana and DMT. This is just some pure DMT untested and caffeine. It's just to compare, but you don't have to always test with some pure DMT. If you don't have, you can just use caffeine. Where do you get the caffeine? There will be a way to get caffeine through, that I will explain in a moment, but you can also get on the internet. It's very easy. You can even get some coffee beans from your kitchen and soak it in the solvent and put it here, and it will also show the same spot. And the Psychotria viridis also has a little bit of DMT, but less than the Diplopteris cabrerana. But what if I wanted to know how much? I don't want to know just, okay, it has more, it has less, but I want to know, okay, how much? Is it 1% in the plant? Is it like 0.01%? It makes a difference, right? So there is a way to do it. And this is just a proof of concept I did. I got some pure DMT, and I dissolved in different amounts. So 2 milligrams per milliliter, 1 milligram per milliliter, and so on. I did the same with NMT, the same with gramine. And you can see there's a very nice gradient, right? You can see that the more concentration, the bigger the spot, the less it becomes smaller. And then I got some, at the end there is some Mimosa hostilis, and I looked at the spot and I compared, okay, that spot is similar to which one of these? And then I thought, okay, more to this than to that one. So just a kind of very basic, it's not like a very accurate quantification, that's why I call it semi-quantification, so it's just to have an idea. But as a proof of concept, once you do the simple calculation, it came out that the Mimosa hostilis has, this one I tested, around 2% DMT. And I extracted and it had 1.7% DMT. So a little bit less, but I could have an idea. So if I got some grass from the garden here and I tested, I could see, oh, it has more or less such amount of DMT. Okay, so what else can this kit be used for? So it can be used for harm reduction. So this is actually the technique we've been doing at Boom Festival to test the drugs. It's the same thing, it's the same technique. So you can do it at home. You can test, okay, you got some acid. Is it acid or is it DOC, which is going to give you whatever, how many hours of trip, and you know, or these NBOMEs, or however you pronounce it, which is also possibly toxic, or is it really LSD? So this kit can also, this technique can also test it. You can, as I mentioned, you can semi-quantify how much of the plant is there, or of the substance. You could also use for cannabis. So many people want the CBD containing cannabis and not so much only the ones that have THC. So you could also do that. You can see which cannabis of the different samples has more CBD than the other. You could even, and that's a bit more advanced, but you could actually separate the substance, like actually get just the substance you want. But I'm not going to explain this now, but it's also possible. So where can you get it if you're interested? So I've been working on this for a long time, and I didn't have the money to buy all the bulk material to give these kits away. So I made a partnership with Bunk Police, which they sell reagents in USA, and they're going to start selling in August 1st. So in a couple of weeks, if you go to Bunk Police website, they're going to have these kits where it comes the whole thing, the whole material. You can get it and you can test the substances at home. You don't have to rely on people with these rumors or with these ideas of what is there or what is not there. You can actually test it. And we're also researching into a mobile app. This will take a little while longer, but that you take a picture of the plate and it will already give you kind of a possibility of what substance is probably there. This will take a little while longer. And we're working on a website, which I'm going to show you guys in a second, which is, if you, like in these reagents, many times you read on the internet, okay, so MDMA turns black with that substance, or whatever, mescaline turns red, and then you may be thinking, okay, but what is it, red more like orange red, or is it more like, you know, violet colored? And so we thought, okay, let's not make people guess what it is, but let's actually film the reactions of the different substances in high quality. And this is an example of one substance. And we actually done this. We have these videos for hundreds of different substances. So tons of different substances and all sorts of reagents. So you can actually see the color exactly how it is. And you can see the pure substance, how it turns, and how in the TLC plate, because it turns a little bit different shades of color. So this will all be together with the Bunk Police website, August 1st. And you will also be able, for example, okay, I only want to see the results of MDMA and the related adulterants or fake substances. So you can compare very easily. And the idea that we have, because I'm not sure if you guys are aware of like Ecstasy Data website, but they kind of publish the results of different tests that people do. So that people send to the lab, and then they go like, okay, the pill, Superman pill has PMA, and they show a picture of the pill and the results. So our idea was, okay, so what if like hundreds of people or thousands of people have these kits at home? What if we can gather this information from this test from all these people and make a really like decentralized way that loads of people are testing, and we can very quickly find out, okay, such and such pill has that thing we don't want, or such and such plant has that alkaloid we want. So through this website, this will also be a possibility. And if you have any more questions, I'm not sure if we're going to have time, but you can always join the DMT-Nexus or write to me at tealconscious@gmail.com. So that's it. Thank you very much. Okay.